And gentlemen, welcome to the webinar. It's the latest in the Channel Focus series of webinars, and today's webinar is titled Choosing and Implementing the Right Channel Incentives. I know a number of you will have questions during the webinar. If you look at the control panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen, one of the options there is to ask a question. So if you feel you have a question you'd like to ask, pop it in there and we will take questions at the end of the session. As a reminder for everyone, the Channel Focus Conference will take place, dates have just been announced, on the 14th and 15th and 16th of May 2019 in Carlsbad, California. We have some awesome speakers already lined up for the event, so look for the communications on that. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers this afternoon. Our first speaker is Stephen Kellam, and Stephen leads the Alliance and Strategy team for 360 Insights. Stephen has a really interesting background. He's got over 20 years experience in the channel, both on the partner side of things as an MSP partner, as a technology vendor, so in the roles of many of you who are on the webinar at the moment, and as an incentives supplier. Stephen has three loves outside of work and family, great wine, coffee, and I think his wife calls him Imelda, an enormous number of shoes. Stephen's also a competitive triathlete, so the coffee helps. I'm not sure the wine is quite as good as that, but Stephen will be our first speaker. And our second speaker is Dan Overgaag, and Dan leads the channel management, sales transformation, and business operations teams for Spur. He's been with Spur for 11 years and has countless engagements across many clients of many different sizes. He enjoys working in the channel due to the complexity and the continual changes, which I know we're all seeing in the channel today. And when not helping clients, Dan thoroughly enjoys the fact that he's in the Pacific Northwest, and that gives him a real opportunity to enjoy the outdoors with his family. He's very keen on skiing, golf, and other sports, and right now with the family, of course, very keen on attending pumpkin patches and other Halloween activities. So without further ado, Stephen, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Rod. We appreciate the introductions. I'm sure both Dan and I do. And really, we want to thank everybody for taking a little bit of their time, whether it's this morning or this afternoon. We know time is one of the most valuable things you have, so we greatly appreciate it. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and, hey, maybe even have a little bit of fun. And as Rod and Dan and I were talking about, maybe we'll stir the pot a little bit, give you guys some ideas to take back with you. Whether they're strategic or tactical, hopefully something that can help you in what you do every day, right? So the agenda, we're going to start off with going over a slide about evaluating your channel and taking a look at that. Then we're going to get into the incentive selection model. We're going to get into the incentive toolbox, and we're going to then pull it all together and really talk about how the 4 C's and how incentives really work together. We thought it would be a good idea to kick the webinar with this slide, and it's called Key Channel Growth and Transformation Challenges, and I think it's something pretty much everybody's familiar with, right? Program growth and alignment, a lack of program transformation, alignment to buyer's journey, incentive effectiveness, new incentive methods. I don't think any of this is new to anyone, but we thought we'd start with this slide because it ties really well into our last webinar. That last webinar, we really introduced some of these challenges because this is what we're hearing from our customers and what we're hearing from our prospects as well. And this slide prompted a great discussion and some very, very real world insights from Lisa Penn over at SAP and from Maria Chen over at Serious Decisions. So if you haven't seen that yet, we suggest you check it out. It's on our blog, so it's on our website. So please do. Excuse me. And today, we're going to spend a little less time discussing these challenges. We really went through that in the webinar. We're going to focus on what to do about that and how segmenting your partners and how correctly doing your incentive planning can really help with this. The funny thing was, as we were building this out, before we could get very far down the road to incentive planning, the subject of partner scorecarding kept popping up. And it seems like every event that we've been to lately, I don't know about you folks, but the idea of how do we segment our partners, right? How do we KPI them? How do we make sure that we understand what their strengths and weaknesses are? And you think about that, and it makes a lot of sense before you would put an incentive against any segment really in your channel. I think it's incredibly important to understand what their strengths and weaknesses and capabilities are, right? The whole idea is we want to get the most out of it. So as we built this webinar, we thought it was interesting and beneficial to look at it through the lens of partner segmentation. Seems like a good idea, yes? To really look deeply at partner capabilities and a defined, measurable, repeatable framework, and then add the right incentive to help achieve a successful transformation. The question was, who do we work with on this, right? And we've seen various methodologies out there. And one of my favorites is what the folks over at the Spur Group have. And I've known Richard and Dan and some of the folks over there for a long time. And I think they do a great job of bringing a methodology to light that's simple and easy to follow and has a lot of very good measurables around that as well. So the first part of the webinar really is going to be Dan walking us through those 4 C's. And then we're going to look at some incentive planning framework, a way to kind of tee up the incentives. And then we're going to look at how do we tie the incentives and those 4 C's together. So it's really going to be a 2-step process, but at the end, I think it's really worthwhile. And you guys are going to walk away with the process of how to look at the partners, how to segment them, and how to tie in all those incentives. So before we do that, though, we are going to get you folks all involved in the beginning. And we're going to do a slide on, we're going to do a poll question. So our first poll question is going to be, which source do you primarily rely on to determine your best partners? Now, is that going to be, here's the 4, you got 4. By the way, a little housekeeping here. As we go through this, we're going to do 3 polling questions as we go out through the whole webinar. And they're each going to have, 4 or 5 questions for you. So the other piece to this is we're all involved in incentives. So everyone who participates in the polling will receive a Starbucks gift card. We thought that was a nice way to reward you, put a coffee in your hand in either the morning or the afternoon and put a smile on your face. So the question, which sources do you primarily rely on to determine your best partners? Is it a PAM report outs? Is it what's coming from your CAMs or your PAMs? Is it a partner scorecarding system? Do you have some sort of system in place, whether it's manual or whether it's some sort of automated system? Is it revenue attainment? Is it all about the revenue for you? And that's really what drives the value of your partners. Or is it number 4? Is it last year's best partners? I'm hoping it's not that one. And as Rod throws up some information on this, maybe Dan, you could talk a little bit about what you've seen and use that as a jumping point into your discussion around the 4 C's.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And, I'm looking at the polls as they kind of come in, and it's probably what we would expect, that a majority of folks rely on revenue attainment as kind of their primary measure. And I'm actually surprised by the number of companies and individuals that are leveraging some sort of partner scoring. So, I think in general across the industry, C would certainly be the most common answer. But, I think we'll talk a little bit about why that shouldn't be, necessarily your primary source.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad one, right? I mean,
no,
you got to have it. But I guess the question is, how much weight does it take, right?
Yep. I think you're exactly right. And each company and each individual is going to have a different perspective and a different weighting as they move forward. Okay.
And I think the results are in. So over to you guys.
All right, Dan. So, hey, based on this, I think we've got a good audience to walk through your 4 C's model.
Perfect. So, first I want to say thanks, Stephen and Rod, for the introductions, and thank you for everyone on the call who's attending. We hope that you find this webinar useful as you start to evaluate your partner ecosystem and your different incentive structures. So, as Stephen mentioned, at the Spur Group, we've created a robust data-driven methodology for helping determine who your best partners are. And to help everyone remember it better, we call it the 4 C's of capacity and partner planning. We're going to go into each C in greater detail in a second, but first let me go through and introduce each one individually. The first C on the left there is a partner's contribution. And this is what almost everyone measures and the poll actually reflects, which is essentially how much revenue a partner is contributing to your company. And obviously, the more revenue, the better the partner by this measure. The second C then is around a partner's capability. And this is a basic measure of what the partner can do. It's an understanding of the products and the services and the solutions they offer and do offer to customers. And this one's a little harder to measure directly, but the good news is you probably already are collecting a lot of the data that works as a great proxy for measuring a partner's capability. You likely already know what certifications or specializations or other credentials that a partner has earned, and you can use these as a basis to measure capability. The third C then in pink is around partners' coverage. And this is an understanding of how essential a partner is to ensuring both geographic and market coverage for you and your company. So think of it this way. The coverage value for each partner changes depending on whether you have 10, 5, or 1 partners covering that particular market. Likewise, if you only have 1 partner selling into a specific type of customer, say small, medium business, that partner is more valuable than a partner that's not selling into that segment. The last C then on the right and in blue is around a partner's commitment. This is one that we all probably know in our gut, have a gut feeling about, but often don't measure. Some call it partner loyalty. And this kind of answers the question on whether if you give a partner a lead, will they sell your product or will they sell a competitor's? Are they acting as strong advocates of your solution and proactively promoting it? Or are they more vendor neutral and simply kind of supply whatever the customer, asks for at any given time? So, why do we look at all 4 of these? And for us, it's basically an algebra formula. If you look at sales plus service lines, plus the market served, plus the propensity to sell your products, you can get a very accurate measure of a partner's revenue impact, or what we like to call revenue capacity. So now let's look at each one of these key measures in detail. Okay. Starting with contribution. So for each one of the measures, you want to score each partner, and think of the score as like a credit score. There's lots of different ways to come up with it, and we're just going to show you the methodology that we've designed and kind of created over the years here at the Spur Group. The first C, contribution, is more than just revenue. It's really about sales velocity. So that's often thought of in terms of frequency, reach, and yield. And we've simplified all the examples in our presentation here to make it a little easier to explain. But the basic thing to remember is that for all of our examples, 1 is always the best score. It's like golf in the end. You want a really low score, okay? So there's a fancy statistical term called quintiles. And basically what this means is you take however many partners or however many there are in a group, and you split them into 5 equal groups. So if you have 100 partners, each quintile is going to have 20 partners. And then you stack rank all of your partners with the best partners on top in terms of that measure or frequency, and then you note where the specific partner you're looking at fits in the stacked ranking by quintile. Okay. So in our example of 100 partners, a partner that's in the first, for the 20th spot is in the first quintile, and a partner 21 through 40 is in the second, and so on. And we then assign a score based on what quintile a partner falls in. So in this case, they would get a score of 1 for frequency. We then do the exact same thing for both reach and yield. And note that we stack rank each measure separately. So it's possible, though, that the same partner will get a different score across each measure. If you want, you can also apply a weighting to each measure, which you can then see across the top, the 30, 20, 50. Now, the question is, why would you want to weight these factors? And it's, it's simple. You may notice that it might be easier for you to increase the number of deals for a partner rather than add, new customers, or it might be easier for you to influence, changing the size of a deal. And weighting can help you kind of better reflect this reality of your business and your channel. So the result then is a combined score for every partner that's a measure of their contribution. And we measure capability in a very similar way. Here, there are three factors that you should look at: people, focus, and productivity. People is, a gauge of how many certifications that a partner has. And this can be either, technical or sales certifications, either organizationally or by seller. Focus is around what products a partner has certifications in. It's important to understand whether they're kind of certified on the most current or the newest products or solutions, or are they, hyper focused on kind of earlier versions. Are they pivoting their business around your strategic products, or are they again kind of focused on more of the older cash cow products? The type of certifications that a partner has can tell you a lot about their business focus and around their capability. Finally, productivity is a way to measure the effectiveness of a partner's certified team. So what we do here is take a look at the total dollars that a partner sells and divide that by the number of certifications that a partner has. We do this in order to recognize that some partners have better trained people instead of just more people. Okay. Each of these is a bit more subjective than straight revenue, so we use a little bit softer criteria to score partners here. Basically what you do is you determine a good benchmark across each one, and then you look and see whether a partner is above or below that benchmark. So if a partner is above the benchmark that you set, they score a 1. If they're at the benchmark, they would score a 2, and if they are below the benchmark that you set, they would score a 3. Then again, if you apply the weighting across the top to each measure, you can end up with a really nice, clean capability score for each partner. Coverage is measured in an entirely different way, though. There it goes. So coverage is about determining how important any given market is. And it's often not the channel organization that owns this determination, and is often found as part of a company's annual planning process. So we tend to think of markets in three possible ways: a geographic territory, a customer segment, or any combination of the two. And any of these approaches works for the coverage model that we're talking about here. But the first step is to categorize each market by the estimated number of customers, and here on the y-axis, and the average revenue per account shown on the x-axis. And this process gives you a very nice 2x2 matrix that lets you then sort kind of the market opportunity. So for instance, you can prioritize white space of a territory, as the growth opportunity. The best markets have lots of white space customers and a high average return per customer. So expanding into a growth opportunity market like this can have a big impact on your revenue. Secondarily, you can, when you look at a territory that has lots of accounts but low average revenue, this is likely a breadth play. And so you want to ensure that you have enough partners to cover it up there in the top left under needs partners. To score partners then on coverage, you look at which markets a partner is doing business in, and obviously partners that are in the more attractive markets get the better scores. Then you can score partners based on their segment or market focus. And again, change the weighting based on your company strategy. And you may also change the weighting based on the maturity of the market you're discussing. And either way, your company's focus on major versus emerging may be different. So there's no right or wrong as far as how you weight these. And once you take the weighting of the scores, you end up with a very nice coverage score. So the last C, commitment, is the one that we see most often overlooked in many planning or scorecarding frameworks that we've seen. And you'd be surprised at how many measures of commitment you might really have already. And we suggest that you take a look at 5 at a starting point at a minimum. So the first is around partner level business planning and their growth delivery. So you want to look at a partner's track record of meeting those business plans. Are they generally on target, or are they often missing the growth delivery targets that they set? The second one there is around your marketing efforts. Are partners participating? Are they logging into your partner campaign center if you have one, and are they conducting joint campaigns? And if they're eligible for MDF, are they using it like you intended them to? The third then is around the lead delivery, and are you tracking leads that you give partners? And if so, are they regularly sharing information and predictably closing those leads that you deliver? Fourth, you can ask questions around whether a partner is sharing pipeline information with you through deal reg or some other system that you might have. And then the fifth one there is whether a partner lists you as a business partner on their website. Are they actively promoting you and your different solutions? So then, just like the other measures, based on a defined criteria that you set, a score can be applied to each partner. And then you can apply the appropriate weighting by score and finally get a total score for commitment. So then, having scored each C, it's easy then to calculate a combined score for each partner. So in this case, if we apply the scores that we talked about from the previous slides, along with the different weighting landed previously, we can get a revenue capacity score for a partner of 7.3. So a pretty good score. This information is obviously very valuable from a partner planning or partner performance perspective, but there's really significant value that can be derived when you actually apply this methodology to your whole partner ecosystem. But first, with any good model, it needs to be really simple and easily manipulated. So we're going to take a quick look at that. Okay. So the value of this model is that each C, so the 4 C's, and each metric, which the M scores, they can all be individually weighting. So as your business or your channel changes, your model can accommodate. And once you've taken the 3 steps on the right of calculating your partner's performance metric, scoring each C, and then indexing each partner's capacity, you can then rate partners into peer level groups and then rank partners based on their capacity rating. And when you do this, you start to create a really accurate picture of your channel. So if you apply the same methodology to your partner ecosystem, your entire channel, you end up with a set of star rankings you can see over on the left. And you can see how different tiers of partners are contributing to each of the different measures, and you're able to generate significant insights about your partners. For example, you can see that 4-star and 3-star partners often have better commitment scores than 5-star partners. That first example there. Now, I'm not going to go through every point on this slide because we've got a lot to get through, and Stephen's got a lot of valuable information on the incentives. But there's a lot you can do with this information. A couple other ways you can use the data that you get from a model like this is you can use it for capacity planning and determining what the right strategy is for you in each territory. Is it all about getting more partners through recruitment, or is it all about getting better performance from your existing partners? And this relates directly to growing your all-up sales capacity. You can also use this model to define your partner management efforts and drive the right behaviors across your partners. And while you probably won't do this level of scoring and planning for all your partners, you should probably be doing some sort of joint business planning with at least your best partners. And this model can help you identify who those might be. So additionally, when you use this model and this scoring methodology, you can actually help it to inform your incentive strategies, which we're going to talk to in a second. It can help you inform how to spend your money and drive the right behaviors, and shape how you determine it and get better ROI. Okay. So let's look quickly at incentive planning. Your channel incentives likely fit into one of 4 buckets. We call the first bucket transaction proficiency, and these are incentives that are used to reward a partner based on the mechanics of the deal. So this could be an incentive around selling a product or winning a specific customer on a targeted list. Capability development, these are incentives that are usually offered when you launch like a new product or a new solution. They're incentives that are all about getting a partner ready to sell a certain solution. They may include offsets on certification or training, or rebates for winning the first deal. Demand generation incentives are usually part of a deal registration system and help partners offset the cost of sales. An example is supporting partners that run proof of concepts. The goal of these incentives is to reward partner leadership around finding and closing opportunities. The fourth is performance attainment incentives, and they're incentives that reward partners for hitting certain targets. Usually these targets are time bound, like growing X% or Y volume on a quarterly, annual, or monthly basis, whatever it might be. Partner scoring can actually help shape your mix of incentives, which are then used to drive behaviors that your partners wouldn't normally do. So start by looking at the distribution of scores across each measure. Then you would look at where a territory or a partner segment or an individual partner lays in relation to the rest of the partner ecosystem. So this then is what you can use to inform your decisions on where to focus your incentive and investment dollars. So for instance, if one of your 4 skis scores poorly at a territory level, it means you need to stimulate behavior like it is in contribution. And again, Stephen's going to talk about the type of incentives you can leverage in order to drive all these scores and drive up a territory or a partner segment. Okay. So before we move on to how we leverage the different types of incentives and how we can use them to increase contribution or commitment as per the slide, let me leave you with the following key takeaways on the 4 C's. A strong partner model is important because it gives you 2 things. It gives you a good framework that shows how to recognize where you need to spend your investments. And perhaps more importantly, a data-driven model is something that you can use internally as you lobby with executives and finance on where to concentrate your investments. So, as mentioned, in a second, Steve's going to go through and talk through how to think about and leverage different incentives. But in the meantime, I think we have another quick poll for you. So, Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you for walking us through that. So the poll question is, what is your greatest real-world challenge? So based on what Dan just walked us through, is it going to be transaction proficiency? Is it going to be capability development? Are we talking about demand generation on the coverage piece, or are we talking about performance alignment? So Rod's going to put this out there again, and once again, a friendly reminder that you do get that Starbucks card as part of the incentive for participating here. So please do participate. It makes it a lot more fun on our end to see this as well as we walk through this and get a feel for what the folks in the audience are thinking. So Dan, as you look at these and you go through iterations of this all the time with your clients, is there a A, B, C, D that stands out more than the others? And so maybe why, or maybe a little bit on a trend around that?
Yeah, I think that we certainly see capability development as being a real challenge right now. It's in how do you transition and move partners, based on kind of the new world, whether it's, cloud or AI or IoT. There's this constant, motion of getting partners to kind of come on board and come with you. And so I think capability development is certainly a real challenge. And I think as I'm looking at the polls as they come up, the poll is reflecting that. And demand gen is also up there. I think that demand generation is becoming more and more critical given kind of today's buyer cycle. So
yeah, and I'm hearing, and I'm glad to hear that.
There we go.
Because what's that? Sorry.
B and C.
Yeah, absolutely right. And you hate to say "told you so," but I'm glad that that's what I'm glad that that's what folks are focused on. And we're going to walk through this. We're going to dig into a little bit from the incentive perspective, and that's absolutely what we hear as well. So we're going to talk about leveraging incentives, and we're going to do that as we stated in the beginning. We're going to do that through the lens of the 4Cs. And we just think it makes a lot of sense to look at it from that perspective. And it's really good to see so many organizations, I'm going to say that in a nice way, right? Questioning their partners' capabilities and really wanting to understand, all right, if I'm going to invest my dollars somewhere, whether it's NDF or co-op or rebates, sell-through allowances, spiffs, reward points, these are real dollars, and we want to use these to drive growth, right? And ultimately, that's what we're all here for, is to drive sales growth. But the reality is, look, we can put these in the wrong place. We have to be really careful and really make sure that we understand what our partners, not just even what they tell us, Dan, because I'm sure you hear that all the time, right? Well, the partner told us one thing, and then we really dug into the 4Cs. It ended up being something totally different. Yeah. So I think validating, and I think something like a real system, a methodology like the 4Cs, really provides an advantage, so that when it comes time to do your budget allocation, budget request, and your allocation, and put together your entire plan, you can do it more accurately. I think that's really what it comes down to. So if you take a look at this slide, I don't know this for sure. I'm assuming most of the folks that are on the call have experience in incentives and know what an MDF and a co-op is, a rebate, a sell-through allowance, a spiff, and a rewards points. And they surely know what a distributor, a dealer partner VAR, or a sales associate are. So we put this on an XY axis. One of the reasons we did this is I love matrices. I talk to Rod about this all the time. And one of the reasons I love matrices is because I can't remember everything. I mean, I really can't remember everything, all the details. And for me, even something really simple like this that has an XY axis is a really nice way to make sure that the X's and O's are covered. So you can have a strategic decision, right? And you can pull something like this up and go, okay, for my distributor, do I really need to run all 5 of these incentives? And if so, or maybe do I scale it back to 2? I know that I can do all 5, but the question is, do I? And then same thing with the dealer. And I think this ties in so well to what you're talking about, Dan, in terms of if I'm looking at a dealer or partner VAR, and I'm looking at whether I spend my MDF, a co-op, my rebate, my sell-through, my spiff, my rewards points, whatever I want to do there, we have to align this to their strengths and weaknesses. And we're going to walk you guys through not only a little bit of a core planning framework, but then we're going to dig into and show you guys an actual way that you can walk through each one of these, kind of a neat way to create a good plan. Okay, and this is it, the core incentive planning component. Really, it's an incentive planning, and the idea is it starts with a clear goal, target audience, behavior, and a program designed to achieve the goal through behavioral change. I mean, that's a really simple definition, but it's a nice definition. And I think this is a simple, easy slide to digest as well, right? When we're looking at this core incentive planning components, start with a goal. What are you trying to achieve? And Dan, you went through a lot of that in your 4Cs. Is this about transaction velocity? Is it about sales acceleration? Is this about capabilities? What is it really I'm trying to do from a goal perspective? And then what's my target audience? Is it the distie? Is it the reseller? Is it the sales associate? And then all the behaviors that you can look at, from enablement to engagement. Some of the things that I think you talked about, Dan, in everything from the commitment side to the velocity side. And then once you've gone through that goals and that target audience, look at those personas, look at those behaviors, then come in behind that with the incentive, and having done the work up front to understand those other pieces, it's going to help make that incentive more effective. So for the next 10 minutes or so, we're literally going to walk through the 4Cs again: the contribution, the capability, the coverage, and the commitment. But we're going to look at this through the lens of incentive planning and the 4Cs and see what levers we can pull. All right, so we're going to go in the same order that Dan went. We're going to keep this really simple. And by the way, take a look at the visuals for a second, folks. You can see there's the 4Cs are up in the right-hand corner. We like creating a cheat sheet for you. So anytime you can look in all of our slides from 360, and you'll be able to see whether we're in the contribution, capability, coverage, and commitment, and get a view of what's coming next as well. So we're going to start with contribution, the transaction proficiency side of that. And we're going to build a goal around that. And the goal that we put in here is improving revenue within the channel. So as we start this goal, we're now going to take that and we're going to look at the other three components. We're going to look at what segment of your channel do you want to address. So in this example, we're going to do sales associate. So by the way, when you walk through this process, and take a step back for a second, I literally think you could take a slide like this and use it as a kickoff to do a half a day session, a whiteboarding session on what you want to accomplish. Think about this. You could take the time to look through each one of your segments: distributor, dealer, partner, VAR, sales associate, and all the behaviors that you see as relevant, right? For our process today, we're going to keep it pretty simple, but we've got engagement, enablement, sales velocity, and sales growth. We had to fit that into one line. We've got demand generation, we've got transformation, we've got customer success. And in this instance, with the sales associate, we're going to look at sales velocity, right? Since we're talking about improving the revenue within channel and transaction proficiency. And then you can look at what's the most effective incentive. Is it NDF? Is it co-op? Is it value rebate, sell-through allowances, spiffs, rewards points? How do I make that linear tie from my segment to my behavior to my most effective incentive? And I'm telling you, there's grays inside of this, right? It's pretty easy on this one. And I actually did this one and chose this one because it's so simple. You know, you got a sales associate, you got sales velocity, you can run a spiff. I mean, you can't get any more traditional than, right? I mean, historically, spiffs are sales incentives rewarded for selling. But, you know, when you get into the dealer, the partner VAR, and you get into the distributor, you know, you could do spiffs. Even on sales velocity, you could do rebates, right? Probably on the distributor, you're going to start with rebates. And that should be a healthy conversation in its own about how effective that is, right? But you can do a spiff today, because spiffs today, Dan, I don't know about what you're hearing, right? But for me, spiffs today go way beyond just sales. Yes, that's important. And I think some of the data we've seen, and Rod's got some good data on this, is 60% of the incentives today are around sales, but almost 40% of the incentives are around spiff are around behavior modification. And the idea of, you know, how do I get ahead of that sales, right? Because look, I love improving revenue in the channel, Dan, but, you know, sales is a lagging indicator, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So when you can run that spiff, think about what that spiff's for. I think even another one you could put in here, you could take sales associate, and you could take, I mean, I guess you could put this in here. It makes sense. You could put SE, right? And all the spiffs that we're seeing for SEs, not all of them, but a lot of them are around, did you read the white paper? Are you plugged into our LMS system, right? Do you understand everything that's going from that perspective? How smart are you getting? Oh, and by the way, SEs are even taking classes in how to sell and how to market, right? So, you know, that's a behavior modification trend that I think is a really smart trend. And I think, Dan, it really ties into your point on capabilities. And even when we're talking about something like transaction proficiency, you know, competence matters, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, the next one, capability. And this one you could dig super, super deep in. And I think even on the previous one on contribution, you can have long discussions, and there's a lot of places you can go. I think capability, I think commitment, to me, I love the commitment side. We're going to dig into that one last. And I think it's incredibly important. And I do agree with you, it's undermeasured. But I think capability is so, so powerful today, because it just means so much more than certifications, right? So let's take this one, and we're going to start with a dealer, a partner, and a VAR, and we'll work through them versus a salesperson. And then we're going to look through demand generation, right? And then we're going to look through NDF and co-op. And one of the reasons I want to start here or go through this piece on the capability side is I think we all recognize how I'm going to say this nicely, how bad our dealers, our partners, our VARs are at digital marketing, how bad they are at inbound marketing, how bad they are at marketing in general, right? And I think this is such a huge issue we have to address, because we can spend time on the sales velocity. We can even spend time on the commitment side. But if our partners, our go-to-market, whether it's disty, dealer, sales associate, whoever they are, look, if they don't have the skills to be successful in today's market, we're not going to succeed, right? And if the partner in particular can't manage awareness and demand generation, they're going to fall further and further behind. I was listening to someone the other day, and they said that they felt like this part of the business, the marketing, in particular inbound marketing, and the awareness and demand generation side for partners, is going to be the biggest chasm that we've seen, more so than the cloud, more so than the move from mainframes to distributed computing, right? I mean, it's just massive. And think about this. It's really logical. You could have partners who spent time in other competency areas and got really, really good at from the technical perspective. And that's where a lot of the strengths lie, in the speeds and feeds. But if nobody knows who they are, and if they lose that edge for awareness, or even more importantly, they create some awareness, but they don't measure up on their web presence, they're going to lose business. And I don't even think there's a too big to fail on this. We were having a conversation with someone at a Fortune 100 company. He was talking about $1 billion partner. And he felt like that $1 billion partner didn't understand where they needed to go from a demand generation and a digital marketing transformation perspective. And he really felt like they were going to erode and they were going to lose a lot of market share. Now, they probably got the resources to turn it, and we'll see where that goes. But I think this is a great opportunity for a lot of partners out there who are resellers, dealers, who embrace it to really take market share. And I think we should be backing that all day long with things like MDF and co-op, right? How do we give these folks the dollars to do this? And there's a lot of ways we can do that. We can go in and triage. And I think an interesting way to do it is maybe segment our partners in their skill sets, maybe into 3 categories. And one of them we can teach, one of them we can teach a little bit, and we're going to have to do prescriptive. And maybe another one we're going to have to make prescriptive altogether. But either way, we can take these MDF dollars and these co-op dollars, and we can use them really wisely. And there's a reason that the guidelines that so many of us are looking at today, there is a big, big emphasis on the digital marketing side and inbound marketing and how partners can be successful with this. Okay, once again, you could go through this forever, right? You could take the dealer partner, you could go through the sales piece, the enablement, the engagement. You could look at spiffs and rebates. You can really go through all of these pieces. But I think the demand generation and the MDF co-op is a great place to start. All right, the coverage piece. Yeah, Dan, you talked about the breadth and the depth on this, and I think this is market penetration, right? This is creating market dominance, and that's a good thing, right? We want partners to be dominant, and whether they're looking at the geos or the verticals or the products, either way, it's good for them and good for us, right? So let's use an example. We'll walk through the dealer, the partner as well. And we'll use enablement as an example here. And we will go to, once again, we'll go to MDF and co-op. So for me, look, I'm going to go down a little bit of rabbit hole here with you, Dan, on this one, and everybody. I'm a big fan of vertical expertise. It's something near and dear to my heart. When I was in MSP, we were located in Sonoma County, and I don't know if you guys know it, but it's right next to Napa County. And both of them are really, really strong in local wineries. Fabulous wines, right? So we, who love wine, thought, hey, we're going to become experts in the winery. And in wineries, from an IT perspective, we soon discovered that we needed a vertical expertise. And we got really good at working with local wineries. And then we did that in Sonoma. We got really good. We cut our teeth. And then we expanded to Napa, and we really got into some premium wines there. But we had to learn the business to see a substantial % of market share. And I think that aligns very much with what you were talking about, Dan, here is, and that's the end goal, right? How much of that market can you penetrate? Now, it didn't hurt that we ended up bartering with some of these top wineries, and I could walk home with a case of Pride wine. But hey, that's another story for another day. So for me, how do you do this, right? What is the incentive that helps you drive this enablement? And there's a couple things you can do with it. Look, I like the MDF dollars. They were a lot of fun. That's what we use. Yes, you can use incentives. You could probably use spiffs or rebates. We use MDF dollars for a lot of things. First of all, we attended industry events or participated in industry events and sponsored industry events. And in the winery business, yes, that included drinking very good wine. You needed to have palate development, right? But seriously, this is about wine software, right? This is about understanding the ecosystem for these wineries. This is about being a thought leader in an industry that's going through a lot of change, right? And so we had to understand POS systems. We had to understand inventory. We had to understand shipping. We had to understand marketing automation. And we had to get plugged in there. And then we had to join industry associations, right? And these are all the things we can lead our partners with, right? Become part of a local chamber of commerce. You know, I sat on the business development side for the Napa local chamber of commerce. And there was an investment that we made there in time and money. There were memberships, there was committee participation, there were speaking events. So we used a lot of these dollars for that. And then on maybe just a standard way that people look at things, we did a lot of lunch and learns, right? And we did it on industry issues like state regulations and social media. We invited people and we had our vendors participate in this. And we talked about everything from the technologies that they needed, but more importantly, how those fit into their vertical. And, it really paid off exceptionally well for us. And not all industries may have some of the upsides that Napa wine business had. But the flip side, look, we also learned from an incredibly competitive market how to drive into verticals. Now, I'll share this as well, too. Our goal was to build up our business and sell it. And when we sold our business to a larger organization in the Bay Area, the fact that we had a vertical expertise not only had helped us dramatically increase our recurring revenue, had put us in a much better place with our vendors. It made us a much more viable business when it came to selling the business as well. So there were a lot of upsides. All right, the last one, commitment, performance attainment. And Dan, I think it's interesting that you said that either this one is the one that we pay less attention to, or one that we just don't measure, right? And I think your example around engagement was great. So you can take a dealer, a partner, a VAR, and I think the engagement side is a huge piece of measuring commitment. Think about this. Partners got a million things going on. We just walked through those three other categories of contribution, capability, and coverage they're looking at. And now we're saying, hey, we've talked to you about these, and we've created these portals, and we've created these systems to help you. Why aren't you using them, right? Or better yet, who's using them, how much, and why? And it's been phenomenal to watch the through partner marketing automation side of this as well. And the TPMAs, and basically, through partner marketing agencies coming in and vendors bringing them in to help their partners. But the deal is, look, you can build it, but can you get them to come, right? And you don't want it to be crack. You don't want to be paying them all the time for engaging something that's better for them. So you could run a dealer partner VAR engagement for the TPMA portal, and you could run it as a spiff. And you could run it very simple, easy. Hey, you go this, you get there. Now you could, if you wanted to keep the enablement, I want to pull up something with rewards points. You could do a points-based system. And I've heard that works very well as well. And I've seen that be successful, where it's not just a spiff to come in and you get a one-time payout for engaging, but you get a points-based system that is over a little bit longer period of time. And each time they enter that portal and each time they leverage that TPMA system that you brought in, they get some points. Now, we can have a conversation later on down the road of what those points turn into. Do they turn into dollars, or do they go into some sort of loyalty? That's a separate conversation for a separate day. But I could definitely see you using reward points here and maybe spiffs as well. Okay. So before we wrap it up, we do have one more question we wanted to throw out there, one more polling question. So what type of incentive will be the most important for you in 2019? Is it going to be rebates? Is it going to be sales through allowances and instant rebates? Is it going to be MDF co-op? Is it going to be spiffs? Is it going to be reward points? So folks, tell us what you think. And once again, we'll make sure that we we reward you. It's not a points-based system we're rewarding you with. This is a spiff, right? You do this, and you're going to get a gift card. So Dan, in your travels and your journeys, and I know you talked about what you see on the 4Cs. Just personally, what incentive do you see? Moving in an upward direction.
Yeah, I think I'd actually answer that maybe in two ways. I think one of the ones that you'll see probably the most investment in will likely continue to be volume incentives. You just got to keep partners focused on selling and transacting and, increasing deal size and the number of new customers. So that'll always, I think, be a large majority of incentive spend. But I think the one that we're seeing more and more and more of is MDF, and even moving away from co-op toward MDF. And as you highlighted, it's a great way to push partners into industry expertise or different segments or geographies. So I imagine that MDF is going to continue to be more and more important in 2019.
Yeah, I think so too. And we'll just wait for the poll numbers to come up here. And I know, and I've had this conversation with you and with Richard over there. MDF, do the right MDF, right? And that means do something that's really measurable. And for those of you guys out there who haven't run an MDF program or looking at changing your MDF programs, that means using those dollars for true enablement, right? It is market development. It is preparing to sell, and whether that's through the TPMAs, or whether that's through the awareness and demand generation skills, or the training that goes into that. There's so much positive that can come out of an MDF being spent the right way. Now, some of our customers out there are a little more traditional and still run co-op, and maybe they don't do as market development, but they really do need the co-op because they need contractually obligated accrual base to run traditional advertising. Think about that if you're in HVAC or if you're in automobile, right? You got to do that, right? And so we're not saying don't do co-op. Tech is a little bit different, especially when you move to the cloud, so it makes sense on an MDF. But even in the other verticals, I hear a lot of folks going, okay, I'm running a co-op, it works really well, but maybe I run an MDF program for my really high-touch partners where they want to get engaged in digital transformation on the demand generation awareness side, and they really want to dig into this, and it's an investment, in their future. So I see folks running both on those. The rebate side, I think, is interesting.
Stephen, we've got a three-way tie on the answer to the poll.
What do we get?
Love to have you comment on that.
Rod, hold on a second. Can I see it? I can't see it right now. So tell me what it is. It's not coming up on my screen. Just tell me what they are.
Yep, you've got a three-way tie between volume incentives, MDF and co-op, and spiffs.
Yeah, look,
I
think
they're all exactly the same.
That's interesting. Well, look, I think they all tie in really, really well together, and I think the rewards point is an offshoot of the spiff, and I think the sell-through allowance and instant rebates are going to be for those who are getting into retail and down the consumer side. I'm glad to have those conversations. So Rod, I think, and Dan, I think the question is not do you do MDF or do you do rebates or do you use spiffs? I think the question is how do you use the 4Cs to figure out which one to use where, right? And make sure you're getting the biggest impact. I think the whole point, and by the way, I think that makes for a nice summary and a wrap up, right? Is do the homework, do the digging, understand your partners, right? I mean, that's the absolute key. I'll tell you a real fast horror story, Rod, and I know we got 3 minutes or less. But we had a company come to us that was moving from co-op to MDF because they wanted to change it to proposal base, and they had never even KPI'd their partners. They were literally changing their entire structure, and they had not taken the time to KPI or scorecards, at least their top 20 partners, right? And it was a disaster. Their utilization went from 95% to 35%, and their sales dropped with these key partners, and it took them 6 months to get it back, right? So, I mean, that's a bad story, but it's something you want to avoid. And then, what behaviors are you trying to change, right? I mean, we talked a lot about that. We built that whole list there, whether it's engagement or enablement, sales growth, Make sure you're understanding what those are. And I think between your 4 C's and what we laid out, that's pretty easy to do. And then what incentives will work best is really going to come out of all of those, right?
And I think to kind of wrap it too, Stephen, I think that on number 3, what incentive will work the best is probably what combination of incentives. There's never going to be, one that's the silver bullet, right? So it's always going to be a combination. And I also say, keep in mind that this whole process is iterative, and you need to constantly be evaluating your partner channel and your partners and your incentive structures, and take a look at the behaviors and how your partners are scoring, and then use incentives as a mechanism to kind of course correct or change partner behavior.
All right, I'm going to leave the best one for you too, right? And okay, keep in mind that it's iterative, right, folks? And I think I think Dan's spot on, but I think Dan, Rod, all of us would agree that this is an iterative approach, and your partner's skill sets are going to change, yep. And your level of investment across when you break it out in those 4 C's and the incentives that you use to drive each one of those is going to change, and it's a work in progress, right?
Absolutely.
Stephen,
okay.
Dan, thank you very, very much. We're almost out of time, so the webinar has been recorded. I know we've covered an awful lot of ground here, so you will be able. We will send you a link, and you will be able to view and download the webinar to share with colleagues, etc. But I think you'll all join with me in giving a big, big thank you to Dan and to Stephen for some terrific information. Thank you very much for joining us, and as I say, look for the email, and that will give you the ability to download the webinar. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.